What's up? It's ya boy, DJ Slate in the building. What's up, Novelli?
Hey, how are you?
I'm good, man. I'm good. I got my Sevilla, Spain bull shirt on today.
That's cool.
It's a nice bull shirt. We're pretty excited about it.
Did you get that in Spain?
I did. Yep, in Sevilla. Was there with a group of 8th graders. Good kids, man.
Oh,
yeah,
that's fantastic.
Yeah, it was good, man. You been well though? You doing well?
I am. I'm enjoying this beautiful Pacific Northwest weather. I'm trying to get out every day.
Good, man. I love it. Well, let's in the words of my brother-in-law, cut the fluff, get right to the stuff here with the kiddos.
Okay.
Welcome back to the Ivy 20th Century Show. It's episode 7. And we're going to kick you right off to remind you where we are context-wise. And then what I think we'll do is we'll move all the way through November 1932. A quick point to make to the kids. We are now in mandatory school mode. As we've been continuing on as if it's we're still teaching every day, but now we are tasked with taking attendance every Friday. Your engagement this week will be monitored by your completion of the Google form that will be attached to this assignment in your Google Classroom. So failure to complete that Google form will be an indication that you were not present for school this week. So please get that done sometime between Friday at 2:00 p.m. and today. So here we are. Hitler's just lost the presidential election in 1932. In the words of his propaganda leader, Joseph Goebbels, it is a fantastic victory that we've attained, but we must come to power in the foreseeable future. Otherwise, we'll win ourselves to death in elections. And there were signs at this time, according to Ian Kershaw, that the NSDAP was reaching the heights, the limits of their mobilization. And so it was becoming clear to the Nazis that there was going to need to be a significant push for power in the coming months of 1932. A reminder as we prepare for this lesson that there are 5 tools that an authoritarian must be skilled with: persuasion, coercion, the role of the leader, ideology, use of force, and propaganda. We're going to be covering propaganda, use of force, the role of the leader, and persuasion, coercion in today's lesson. Novelli and I were talking, and we've decided that instead of a timed right to be administered in May, what we're going to do is we're going to have y'all do an actual paper like you would in college on this very topic right here. So you can imagine it's going to be similar to a timed right, just without the timed requirement, and you will also be allowed to use your notes to prepare that paper. So you can expect, as we get closer to that date, we still got to get through Castro, which we're going to be starting here in about a week and a half or so, 2 weeks. You can expect Castro to be the topic of conversation starting real soon, and then we'll get that paper out to y'all, and you can work on that toward the end of May. So that's kind of the big picture task that we're aiming for. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to stop by office hours for me. My office hours are on Friday. 10, what are my office hours? 10, I can't remember right now. 10 to 11:30, I think, 11:45. 10 o'clock to 11:45. I'll send out a Google form. You can sign up for those office hours if you have questions. Novelli, when are your office hours?
On Tuesday, they are from 10:15 to 11:45. And on Fridays, they're at 1 p.m. to 2:30 p.m.
Cool. My Tuesday office hours are the same time as my Friday office hours. I just am available via email on any day, really. But those are the days that I pretty much sit and wait on my computer for questions to come in. So again, Tuesday 10 to 11:45 is when you can get me there on email if you have urgent questions. Okay. All right. So let's get rolling. Where are we going today? We're going to be on a roller coaster ride of pure craziness. We're going to start in April 1932. We're going to land November 1932. There will be humiliation for Hitler. There will be a complete loss of hope for Hitler, and then a stunning victory and revival of hope for him. There will be Office references. If you don't watch The Office, that is a shame, but I forgive you. You will likely be wondering what I'm talking about when we get there. There will also be an expectation, again, a reminder that you will complete the accompanying Google form with this lecture. This will be your attendance for the week, plus the check-in on Friday. Let's start with a guy named Groner, Wilhelm Groner, Secretary of the Interior. This guy was kind of like the Attorney General in our country. He's in charge of like the domestic security of Germany internally. And so this guy was facing in April, this presidential election had come with significant political violence, especially by the SA. The SA was getting larger. They had about 400,000 members in it as of April 1932, and he was concerned about these partisan paramilitary forces that were out there engaging in violence. And so he instituted a ban on the SA and the SS, and his hope was to absorb them into the Reichswehr, which is another term for the German military. This was an interesting ban. It only targeted the NSDAP. So if you can imagine, Novelli, if you're a propagandist, how are you going to spin this?
For whom? Propagandist for whom?
For the NSDAP.
Oh, you're going to spin it like this is somebody, actively coordinating against us to try and minimize the power that we're gaining within society.
Yep. And that's exactly what the NSDAP is going to do with this, okay? And enter a gentleman named Kurt von Schleicher, who was a subordinate to Groner. He was more of a military leader within the domestic affairs of Germany. And he begins working on President Hindenburg behind the scenes to dismiss Groner. There's been several episodes in The Office where Dwight is pushing really hard to have Jim fired. As a matter of fact, that was a theme in several of the first several seasons, where it was just he hates Jim. Jim is an obstacle, according to Dwight. And so, if you think about Dwight trying to get Jim to fire Michael, that's exactly what Schleicher was doing to Groner. He was trying to get President Hindenburg to fire Groner. And as I said earlier, this issue that Schleicher had, Schleicher was very favorable to the NSDAP. He was a sympathizer, and he wanted to see the NSDAP. He actually wanted to see Germany become an authoritarian state. But he had plans of his own that we'll talk about later. Now, as you had alluded to earlier, there's going to be significant propaganda against Groner for this ban just on the SA. And so the chancellor at this time was a guy named Brüning, and he looked really bad as a result of the propaganda that the NSDAP is going to start up here, that the government is only unfairly targeting the SA. The SA is not the only paramilitary organization that exists. As a matter of fact, every political party had a paramilitary wing attached to it. The Zentrum Party had one. The Social Democratic Party had a paramilitary organization. The Communist Party had a paramilitary organization. But the only organization that was targeted by the government, by the Brüning government, was the NSDAP. And so Brüning is going to be put in, his position as chancellor is going to be put in grave jeopardy. And it was von Schleicher's aim in undermining Groner and Brüning simply to sow chaos. And as a matter of fact, what Schleicher wanted was to forge an alliance between the NSDAP and the Reichswehr, of which, by the way, Schleicher is going to become the minister of. So Schleicher is on the fast track to becoming the Minister of Defense in Germany, the leader of the German military. And so he is hoping to bring the NSDAP's paramilitary wing, the SA, under the control of the Reichswehr. As Kershaw puts it, the idea was to tame Hitler and incorporate the valuable elements from his movement into what would have been essentially a military dictatorship with populist backing. And the idea would be that Hitler would become sort of the underling to Schleicher in this government. Questions, Novelli?
No, that seems to make sense. So the Reichswehr, this is like the official military of Germany?
Yep, that's the title of the German military.
Okay. So aren't they? They're still pretty negatively affected by the Treaty of Versailles, aren't they?
Correct. Yep. And von Schleicher here is working on trying to change that. He's trying to undo the Treaty of Versailles. And
So
so
is this legal?
picture.
What they're doing?
This would not be legal. This would not be in accordance with the Treaty of Versailles.
Gotcha.
So Schleicher makes it obvious that he opposes the ban on the SA. And so he wanted a feeder organization for an expanded German military. What he wanted was to expand the German military under his leadership and then have the SA be kind of like ROTC, right? Like you start in this sort of this future military, or like the whole point of ROTC is to like get younger individuals into the military mindset so that when they actually become old enough to enter the military or after their education, right, they join the military already with all the training that preliminary training that was in place. And so what is going to end up happening is Schleicher's going to, in April, he's going to meet with Hitler, and he's going to tell Hitler that the Reichswehr, under his leadership, if you will, no longer supports Brüning as chancellor. And this is a secret meeting. This is Brüning does not know that this is happening behind the scenes here, that the German military is about ready to announce their no confidence, if you will, in Brüning. May 7, 1932, Goebbels confirms that Brüning's going to be fired in the coming days. Brüning holds on until May 29th, 1932, at which point he resigns. He held on far longer than Goebbels or Hitler thought he was going to make it. And so he resigns in 1932 there, May 29th, 1932. His resignation is very important because this is a chancellor, right? This is the leader, the leader of the German legislature, the Reichstag. This is kind of like the legislative gatekeeper in Germany. When if the president ever invokes Article 48 powers, in many cases the chancellor gets to absorb some of the power that the president gets to wield. And so when Brüning resigns, this is going to have implications in the positive form for the NSDAP. It meant that the ban on the SA would likely be lifted. It meant that the Reichstag would be dissolved, and there would be another election called for the Reichstag. According to Goebbels, at this time when Brüning resigns at the end of May, he said the system is collapsing. The SA ban is going to be dropped. Uniforms are going to be allowed again. Our SA is going to be able to wear their brown shirts again. The Reichstag is going to be dissolved until the next elections are called. That's the most important of all, according to Goebbels. Franz von Papen will likely become the chancellor. Voting, out to the people, says Goebbels. And the end is becoming more near.
And this is all pretty rapid.
This is all very rapid. You got to understand that where we land is going to be in November of 1932. It will be the 5th Reichstag election in the year of 1932.
Yeah, that's hard to even fathom.
Imagine Congress just saying, all right, we're done. We need to have another election to see what the people want. And then the people say, all right, this is what we want. And then Congress convenes, and then they're like, you know what, Reichstag convene, we're canceling it. Let's go to another election. Imagine that 5 times. Imagine how expensive that would be.
Yeah. I can't remember.
Yeah. I lost your, I can't hear you. You can't hear me. Yep. All right. I'm going to keep going because it's recording here to my computer. And when Novelli hears me, he'll let me know. Okay.
Gotcha.
So, all right. Hindenburg calls von Schleicher to his office and says, all right, what do you think we should do? Who do you think I should nominate to replace Brüning? And Schleicher says, you should nominate my buddy Franz von Papen, of whom Schleicher had served in the military with. Schleicher thought that von Papen would be a perfect fit for chancellor because he was a conservative aristocrat who was a member of the Center Party, the Zentrum Party, who also had a military background, which would appeal to President Hindenburg, who was a military hero. Schleicher envisioned a coalition forming between the NSDAP and the Center Party as a result of bringing von Papen on board. Behind the scenes, Schleicher made a deal with Hitler. The deal was, if you support von Papen will lift the ban on the SA. And so Hitler was like, all right, sounds like a good deal. Because von Papen was coming from the Zentrum Party, this would naturally mean that there might be a new coalition in the Reichstag that would produce a majority coalition of the conservative Zentrum Party with the hyper-conservative NSDAP. So Schleicher's trying to move the pieces around and say, all right, if I get Papen in as chancellor, then we can get Hitler, who's the leader of the NSDAP and is 37% of the Reichstag vote. We can form this amazing coalition where we can get stuff done in the Reichstag that will allow Germany to bring a little more order to the chaos. Schleicher was immediately promoted to the actual Minister of Defense and built the entire cabinet for President Hindenburg in June of 1932, which is pretty impressive. He got to essentially place all of the cabinet ministers in the president's cabinet. They call this cabinet the Cabinet of Barons. It was essentially a cabinet of very prominent, influential business leaders and political leaders in Germany. It's not going to last very long because what happens is Papen had made a deal the day before he accepted the position of chancellor. He told the leader of the Zentrum Party, I will under no circumstances accept any position or any appointment that Hindenburg puts in place for me. He told the leader of the Zentrum Party, I am not going to accept anything. The next day, he accepted the position of chancellor. The leader of the Zentrum Party said, you're out. You're no longer in our party. We want nothing to do with you. You stabbed us in the back. The NSDAP at this point, Hitler's party was like, well, I mean, look, you might lift the ban on the SA, but if you don't have any of the Zentrum Party support, why would we form a coalition with you? The Zentrum Party is not going to form a coalition with us, so we're out. So that then fails to materialize. Papen loses all support from Hitler and the NSDAP. And so his government's going to end up being weaker than the government that they were replacing with Brüning. He has no support, not from the NSDAP. He's got no support from the Zentrum Party. He certainly doesn't have any support from the Communist Party. All right, he's a conservative. So the Social Democrats are out. He has zero support in the Reichstag. Now, Hitler, of course, even though he's not going to support Papen, is still going to demand the lifting of the ban on the SA, which happens on June 16th, 1932. At this point, the entire season of summer was open season on communists. So well-to-do Germans, this is what's interesting. Many Germans were totally okay with the communists being killed by the NSDAP. They were totally fine with it because you think about the well-to-do Germans, they were like, if a communist government takes hold, that's going to be worse for us. According to Kershaw, the violence that the NSDAP engaged in alienated remarkably few voters. So voters were okay with the NSDAP being crazy out there on the violence.
So the political violence, Germans were pretty much adjusted to this, weren't they? It was kind of a part of existing in the political sphere in Germany at the time.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, we saw already in the Conditions of Germany unit, there was all sorts of craziness in the 1920s, political violence in the 1920s, you know, people were getting assassinated left and right. All right, so second half of June, there were 17 politically motivated murders. By July, there were 86 political killings, most of which were the SA and the communists killing each other. On August 10th, 1932, Papen issues an emergency decree to combat terrorism, and it goes into effect pretty quickly. I want you to remember this day. We're coming back to it. Papen's government was losing control. They were also gaining power at the same time. Papen ended up taking over the entire state of Prussia, which was controlled by Social Democrats. The Social Democrats offered zero resistance, and he was essentially consolidating his power and taking over state governments as the national chancellor, which was unheard of at this time. Hitler begins what's called his third Germany flight, which is just him traveling from towns and cities to essentially run for, advocate for his political party in the next Reichstag election. So he's out, he ends up visiting 53 towns and cities to spread propaganda why the people should be supporting the NSDAP. His theme was really simple. This was it. The parties of the November Revolution, we're talking the parties that signed the Treaty of Versailles, had presided over the untold ruin of every aspect of German life. His own party was the only one that could rescue the German people from its misery. And as of July 31st, 1932, Reichstag elections were held again. The NSDAP increases their share to 37.4%, which won them 230 seats in the Reichstag. Now, you got to remember, in the presidential election of April 1932, Hitler won 37%. So this was only a 0.4 increase since the April elections. And so Hitler, this is the evidence that Kershaw used to suggest that the enthusiasm was leveling off for the NSDAP. Nonetheless, they were by far the largest party in the German Reichstag. On August 6, 1932, so again, we're just a week after the elections, okay? Hitler meets with Schleicher, who at this point now is the Minister of Defense, and he imposes his demands. He says, all right, the NSDAP just won 37.4% of the seats in the Reichstag. We have some demands. I want to be the chancellor. I want Wilhelm Frick to be the interior minister, the leader of the police. I want Hermann Göring to be the air minister for essentially the coming Air Force. Gregor Strasser, remember that name? The socialist wing of the NSDAP. I want him to be the labor minister. And I want Joseph Goebbels to be the education minister. Now, Novelli, when you look at this list of demands Hitler has, what is he trying to do? What is the aim here when you think about the NSDAP's ideology? Okay. Why would you want to have these NSDAP officers lead these cabinet departments? You hear me?
I just got your voice. You've cut out a lot for me today. I'm sorry.
All right, man. It's all good.
What would you ask?
Why would Hitler want these cabinet positions to be filled with Nazis?
Oh, because these are the most influential cabinet positions in Germany, and it would be the most effective way to introduce his ideology on a mass scale across all sectors of the population.
Correct. You think he's going to get it?
I would think so.
Yeah, I mean, he's 37.4% of the German people clearly want his ideology, right?
Yeah.
Well, no, he's really not going to get this, but I'll tell you kind of what happens in between these requests. Schleicher was not too worried about, if he gives Hitler these positions, he's not too worried about it because Schleicher controls the military. So, I mean, we can take him out if we need to. Rome, the leader of the SA, also has meetings with Schleicher, and he gets a meeting with Chancellor Papen on August 12th. Rome makes it clear in these meetings with both the Chancellor and with Schleicher that it's binary. You're either going to give Hitler what he wants, or there's going to be a complete revolution by the SA. On August 13, 1932, Hitler, Rome, and Frick meet with Schleicher and Chancellor Papen. So we have, this is basically the next day, right? And what ends up happening is Hitler was told that Hindenburg would not be appointing Hitler as chancellor. When Papen reflected on this meeting with Hitler, he reflected in a journal. He said, I soon realized that I was dealing with a very different man from the one I had met 2 months earlier. He's talking about Hitler here. The modest air of deference had gone, and I was faced by a demanding politician who had just won a resounding electoral success. So Poppin suggested that Hitler join the government not as chancellor, but as vice chancellor, as co-manager, if you will. There's a link here. You can find this in your Google Classroom to the scene that I'm referring to. I can't obviously do it on a screen share, or I'd probably get shut down by YouTube for copyright violations. I'm not going to do that. But there's a great scene in which Michael is learning that he's going to have to share his power with Jim. He gets a phone call from the CFO or CEO, David Wallace. And in this phone call, Wallace tells Michael that he will be co-managing with Jim Halpert. And Jim says, so manager and co-manager? And David says, no, co-manager and co-manager. There's a lot of moving pieces, and this is the only way I can make it work upstairs. So you think of Hindenburg as being sort of the David Wallace here, and you have, you know, the messenger in Poppin telling basically Hitler that it's going to be, you know, you and I co-chancelling, co-chancellors or vice chancellor, and Hitler's not going to have any of it.
So he's almost like the assistant to the chancellor.
Yes, that's how Hitler perceived it. And he rejected point blank on August 13th the notion of that being the head of such a large movement, he's not playing second fiddle. And then when Poppin suggested, well, you can go ahead and be resistant all you want, but would you go ahead and appoint, you know, one of your maybe your senior members of the NSDAP to be vice chancellor? And Hitler was like, no, I'm definitely not going to allow one of my subordinates to become the position of vice chancellor over me. That's not going to happen. And so Hindenburg, hearing of this failed meeting earlier in the morning of the 13th of August, he summons Hitler for a meeting that afternoon to meet directly with the president of Germany. This is a huge meeting. And so Hitler meets 4:15 p.m. And I kind of have this is not verbatim. Some of it is, some of it isn't. I took what was a pretty complex conversation, simplifies it a little bit. Essentially, President Hindenburg, which is the PH, asks Hitler point blank, are you prepared to serve in this government? We'd love to have you in the government. Clearly, you're the leader of a movement that's very, very profound in this nation. Hitler says, no, I'm not serving in Poppin's government. It says, I must demand that the leadership of the government and the leadership of the state, the leadership of the government and the state for me and my party. And President Hindenburg says, no, that's not happening. You are not going to get control of the entire government. Your party controls 37.4% of the Reichstag. You don't get to control 100% of the state, the government. So he says, I refuse. And these are Hindenburg's words. He says, I cannot answer before God, before my conscience and the fatherland. If I hand over, I'm sorry, it's supposed to say hand over, the entire power of the government to a single party and one which is so intolerant toward those with different views, I'm not going to be able to answer my conscience here. It's simply not going to happen. Adolf Hitler says, I will only accept the position of chancellor. And Hindenburg says, nope, not going to happen. And he refers to Hitler as a comrade, and then says, bless you. He tells him, I know you're opposed, but please conduct your opposition in a gentlemanly fashion. Any terror will be treated with the utmost severity. (4:35 p.m.) Meeting was adjourned. 20 minutes is all it lasted. I'm getting a internet connection unstable warning here. Hitler went out to the hallway and basically exploded. He said to one of his assistants that the opposition will be fierce and I will accept no responsibility for the consequences of that opposition being fierce. This was the greatest setback to Adolf Hitler since his failed push attempt in Munich. The all or nothing gamble had left Hitler with nothing.
So, what was Hindenburg most concerned about in not awarding Hitler with the position of chancellorship?
It was the power that was going to come with it. He did not want Hitler to have the authority, the power that the chancellor would bring with it, especially with the ideology being so hateful of the NSDAP.
So he was in favor of bringing him within the fold within the government, but he just wanted his power to be checked in a position that wouldn't hold as much authority. Is that correct?
Yeah, I wanted two chancellors, basically.
Okay.
Kershaw's closing remarks on this day, on the August 13th, are pretty profound. I included his whole excerpt because I thought it was strong. He says that the 13th of August ought to have been a defining moment in Hitler's bid for power. After that, it should have never come to a 30th of January, 1933. Without allies in high places, able eventually to persuade the Reich president to change his mind, Hitler would never, even as head of a huge movement and with over 13 million supporters in the country, have been able to come to power. That the chancellorship was refused to Hitler after he had won victory in the July elections, and then was handed to him after he suffered a defeat in the November elections, was not attributable to any triumph of the will. The triumph of the will is a propaganda campaign that Hitler engaged in with Goebbels to make himself appear to be the hero who had this persevering will. Kershaw's position is that it was actually allies in high places, big business in particular, that was able to convince Reich President Hindenburg to change his mind and appoint chancellorship to Hitler. What's interesting is these November elections are going to be a massive loss for Hitler. And it's going to be after that defeat that he's able, that the Reich president is going to appoint Hitler as the chancellor. Now, we're not quite done yet. Some things are going to happen here to round out the summer. Hitler's going to blame Schleicher for betraying him with Papen and with von Hindenburg. Schleicher's going to pay for this with his life. Open opposition to the Papen government was proclaimed by the NSDAP and Hitler. You might be wondering why was Schleicher blamed for this? Remember, he was the leader of the Reichswehr at this point. He's the Minister of Defense, and Hitler believed that Schleicher was going to secure for him the position of chancellor. And so when Schleicher ends up on the side of Papen and is sort of promoting this vice chancellor role for Hitler, Hitler sees that as a betrayal, and he's going to end up killing Schleicher for this. August 10th, 1932. Remember that decree I was telling you earlier, don't forget about? 90 minutes after it went into effect, a group of SA men murdered an unemployed laborer and communist sympathizer in front of the victim's mother and brother. They call it the Potempa murder, and it was horrific in its brutality. Yet by this point, it was pretty routine. The emergency decree that I referenced earlier actually it prescribed the death penalty for anyone who was found guilty of these premeditated political murders. And so the trial happens August 19th through the 22nd. So just like 10 days or so, not even that, just a couple days after Hitler receives this terrible news on the 13th of August that he's not going to get the chancellor position. So he's in a bad mood this whole week, you can imagine. Well, this murder trial was highly publicized, and the death penalty was pronounced on the accused. At the same time that this trial happened, there was another trial that had just concluded of two what's called Reichsbanner, or basically an equivalent to the SA, only for the SPD and the Zentrum Party. The Reichsbanner was out there sort of policing the wings. So they were out there stepping in against communist violence and stepping in against Nazi violence, and in engaging and stepping in, they too were killing people. And so there were two members of this Reichsbanner who were given relatively light sentences. They were not sentenced to death on the same day that the sentences were handed down to these members of the SA. Now, here's the thing, is their crime happened in July. The proclamation, the decree had not gone into effect yet as of this July 1932 crime. And nonetheless, however, this is going to be a fantastic opportunity for the NSDAP to engage in propaganda. Once again, here's this government that's out there advocating or really punishing only right-wing political parties. They're not punishing left-wing political parties. Göring, a minister in the NSDAP, he's a high-ranking official in the Reichstag, basically the Nazi spokesperson in the Reichstag. He praises the condemned men. On our August 23rd, Hitler openly says, "My comrades, in view of this most monstrous verdict in blood, I feel tied to you in unbounded loyalty. Your freedom is from this moment on a question of our honor. The struggle against the government under which this was possible is our duty." And here you have it. The head of Germany's largest political party was openly expressing solidarity with convicted murderers. Hitler would come out on the 24th and he would essentially say, "You all now see why I refuse to participate in this government, which is capable of doing such things. With this deed, our attitude toward this national cabinet is prescribed once and for all." Notice the propaganda here. Hitler does not say, "You all see now why I was not given permission to be the Chancellor of Germany." Instead, it was, "You all see why I refused to participate in this government." Right? So this is blatant propaganda. Blatant propaganda. He's revising what happened on the 13th, right? Trying to take what was humiliating and spin it into, "Y'all see why I can't be a part of this government? We must end this government now."
Yeah, it's not that I got rejected to go to prom. I just didn't want to go to prom.
Yeah, and now you see why. Look at what she's doing. See, that's why I declined. And she's over there like, I said no to you, man. Your proposal was whack. It's not happening. So, so guess what Poppin does? He caves. And he commutes the death sentences into life sentences. And Hitler, in March of 1933, is going to free these murderers under a Nazi amnesty rule. The rule of law is, by March of 1933, when Hitler essentially sets these murderers free, that it's dead by March of 33, but it's dying here. Poppin has just completely gutted his own decree, and it's eroding away pretty rapidly here, the power of the rule of law. And so a solution is offered. Hitler's not going away. It's obvious that he's actually becoming more volatile. And so a solution was offered. President Hindenburg, you should appoint a cabinet of struggle. That's what they called it, a cabinet of struggle that would be comprised of communists and Nazis. So put in a cabinet of people who hate each other's guts. Just balance the power with people who hate each other, right? And then at this point, there would be no hope for any stuff getting done, which would then allow the chancellor to essentially become the sole leader, maybe with the president's blessing, of Germany, right? And this would force the Reichstag to be severely weakened. And here's the actual formal plan. So President Hindenburg, this is what we're going to need you to do. We need you to dissolve the Reichstag. We need you to postpone elections and actually go against the Weimar Constitution. Let's go beyond the 60-day rule. That where you have to have elections in like 60 days was the law, right? Was the Constitution. Let's rebuild the Reichstag in this delay. Let's rebuild it. Let's turn it into a two-chamber system like Congress, with one chamber that's not elected. It's purely appointed. And then let's just end party rule. We need to get the right president. We need you to approve this. And then let's get the backing of the army to be ready to combat any opposition that might come from the NSDAP or the communists. Hindenburg agrees to the plan. And he declares a state of emergency. He postpones the elections. And Germany right now at this point is transitioning into an authoritarian state. And then it gets even crazier. So this to me is stunning, but I'm kind of a history nerd. I can't believe some of this stuff it actually happened. But check this out. So Hindenburg agrees. He said, all right, let's dissolve the Reichstag. Let's go to new elections, but we're gonna have them later. Okay, we're not gonna do them in the 60-day. We'll rebuild the Reichstag, right? It's kind of an emergency situation. So he declares a state of emergency, and this is the end of August that this is all happening. Papen should have walked right into the Reichstag and said, y'all, the president says y'all are dissolved. But he doesn't. He allows like almost 2 weeks to elapse. On September 12th, the communists shock the entire Reichstag by calling for a vote of no confidence in the Papen government. When Hitler hears about this vote, he can't believe his ears. Papen didn't expect the vote. And so he had to scramble somebody to go back to the chancellery, the building where the chancellor lives and operates out of. He had to go get the emergency decree, go get Hindenburg's decree to dissolve the Reichstag. We need to issue the decree before they have this vote in no confidence. Meanwhile, Hitler is like, approve the vote, approve the motion. And so the NSDAP is like, yes, let's have a vote of no confidence. Let's do what the communists are asking right now. And so they all vote. They call for the vote. The communists vote in favor of it. The Nazis are in favor of it. The NSD or the Centrum Party is in favor of this no confidence vote. Papen shows up. He finally gets the red box that has the emergency decree to dissolve the Reichstag in it. Okay, he opens it up. You're supposed to read it. The president declares the Reichstag's dissolved until the next elections, but he can't even speak before the vote gets called. Papen steps up to the mic basically and is like, I need to speak. And Goring, the NSDAP leader, is like, bro, we're having a vote here, dude. Don't disrupt the Reichstag. And so they have the vote. Papen storms out. He demands to speak. Goring just ignores him. Shh, go away. Goring is reading the votes. The government was defeated, 512 votes to 42, with 5 abstentions and 1 invalidated ballot paper. All parties, major parties, including the Zentrum, had supported the communist proposal. It was received with wild cheering in the Reichstag. Goring read out Papen's dissolution order. He said, oh yeah, Papen left this red box here. Here's what it says, but too late. Sorry, we already voted. The Reichstag voted. The Reichstag has the power now, not the chancellor. Sorry, Papen, not gonna happen. Kershaw says Papen had been shown in the most humiliating way possible to be a chancellor almost devoid of public support. Hitler was beside himself with joy. New elections for the Reichstag loomed. The experiment that was proposed to the president to recreate the Reichstag, that's out. Nope, not with the no confidence vote. It's not going to happen. It's simply not going to happen. They're not going to delay the next elections. And so next week's episode, the next Reichstag election, we scheduled for November 6, 1932. This would be the 5th election of the year.
That's insane.
That's a lot of content. You got any questions?
It's just a dizzying amount of political turmoil.
It had to be just as the moral, like, I can't imagine the average German citizen cared, you know? So I'll wait.
Kind of put it into context, everything else that's going on. It's pretty insane.
I caught the first half of that. It came back audio wise. You said in the context of you just kind of whatever you just said. What were you saying before that?
I was just basically saying that the politics itself are crazy on one hand, but the context that you have this post-World War I state that already has a litany of other issues, combining those two things together, it's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, people were very riled up, but at the same time, I imagine incredibly demoralized.
Yeah.
5 elections in 1 year. It's just crazy. So next week we'll have the election of November 6, 1932, of which Kershaw already referenced, right? This is going to be, they're going to actually, the NSDAP is going to regress. They're going to have less support in this election, suggesting that the people were kind of souring on Hitler. And thanks to some luck, some right people, right place, right time, influential people, Hitler's going to be appointed chancellor by President Hindenburg. So, and then we'll wrap things up.
Cool.
So, all right, man. Well, I'm gonna let these guys go. It's been a long enough lecture as it is. We are, I think we're supposed to be giving them an hour and a half, 2 hours of work or something a week. Is that about right there?
Yeah, that's what they said.
Yeah, so this should you guys should be pretty busy with the Google form, filling that out and getting that submitted between now and Friday. Okay, we want that done on Friday so that we can measure your engagement and get the attendance submitted to the district. So cool. Anything else you want to say to him, Novelli?
Nope. Well, we miss seeing you guys, and I hope you're staying safe and keeping your family safe and staying engaged and getting outside and getting some sunshine too.
Yeah, absolutely. Miss you guys. I really, really don't like this form of teaching. I'd much rather be in the presence of my kids. I'm an extrovert. You guys are my energy. And so it's hard, but I feel as I mentioned last week in my address to y'all, kind of a profound sense of duty to still do this job and do it well. And so here we go. The 7th episode of the IB 20th Century Show, brought to you by ya boy, DJ Slate and Adam Michelangelo Novelli. Y'all have a great week, and we will see you on Tuesday of next week. Take care, y'all.
All right, see ya.